I know it's intermission time and it's the only social time you get, but we have so much to talk about that we're gonna fill intermission with some conversation. And feel free to come and go if you need a bio break. Of course, take that. But just a couple of words before I bring up some folks to talk with. My name is Fred Child. I host a radio show called Performance Today, which is on public radio stations around the country. And I'm tremendously lucky that I get to share with music lovers coast to coast great concert performances from all across the country and around the world on a daily basis. It's really special for me to be in Houston because there are so many musical organizations in Houston that are world class and whose work we are happy to share on our show. And there are many folks here tonight, actually. John from the Houston Symphony is here tonight, and other folks from the Houston Symphony. It's a pleasure of mine to share the Houston Symphony recordings on our show. ROCO, formerly known as the River Oaks Chamber Orchestra. The Shepherd School of Music. Matthew from the Shepherd School of Music is here. Andrew Stopey, pianist, is here as well. And, of course, the Apollo Chamber Players. So Houston is a frequent stop on our musical trips on my daily radio program. And I don't have to tell you that Houston is a great food town as well. And Wang Jie, the composer whose commission is coming up in the second half, Wang Jie and I are married for the past 6 years. And one of the things we love to do when we travel is eat. And one of the great Vietnamese restaurants in town is Hun. And there are some folks here from Hun tonight too. So this evening in itself is kind of a celebration of the richness of the Houston scene. So it's a tremendous pleasure for me to be here. And let's bring out Matt Dietrich from the Apollo Chamber Players, Daryl Robinson, who's our organist tonight, and composer Wang Jie. As we're getting settled, this is really an auspicious day. It's a full moon. Matt mentioned earlier that today is the day of the annual Mid-Autumn Festival, the Moon Festival, big in Chinese culture and other Asian cultures as well. We're here with the Apollo Chamber Players, whose name comes at least in part from the spirit of adventure and exploration of the Apollo project. And Wang Jie and I went to the Space Center today, and I just want to share that that was especially meaningful for me. I was born in Huntsville, Alabama, because my father worked for Boeing in the 1960s and was one of the engineers working on creating and building the Saturn V booster rocket. And my father passed away when I was very young, and today was the first time I was in the presence of a Saturn V booster rocket. And to see what was the handiwork of so many people, including my father, and to be in the presence of that was quite a meaningful experience for me today. And we also saw a film at the Space Center, and of course the astronauts are talking about looking down at the Earth. You don't see borders between countries. There's a real sense of the oneness, the wholeness of the Earth. And Matt Dietrich, I've always had the impression that that was part of the founding principle of the Apollo Chamber Players.
Yes, thank you, Fred. And actually, I believe that term is called the overview effect. And I only know that from astronaut John Harrington. If you saw our Moonstrike project a couple of years ago, that's now out on CD. I'm going to promote our CD because it's a pretty cool CD, and I'm very proud of it. And yes, I mean, I think, Fred, your idea of a borderless world is a good one, and I think that through music we can connect with people in ways that are more meaningful, and I think people can latch on, especially in a global city like Houston, to the good of different cultures, and that's what we try to express through our music. Also, just quickly mention that when I was a young boy, I wanted to be the first person to play the violin in space. I have yet to achieve that dream, but I'm working my way to meet Elon Musk at some point here. So if anybody has connections. But I do feel like, as far as the boldness of how humanity can dream, you know, I think especially when you're a child, that kind of innocence is particularly important. And I think also that comes through in your music, Jie. Jie has just been so wonderful in sharing her humanity with us that you'll hear in her new piece this evening. So I feel, for myself, living and working in Houston, Space City, this is what I am meant to be doing. And Apollo Chamber Players, we're so proud to be representing the best parts of the city.
And speaking of that sense of exploration, we've heard in the first half, Daryl played this incredible new piece for solo organ. We heard 2 pieces for string quartet. The organ has a history going back 2,300 years, and an incredible history in Western liturgical music, of course, and more recently in concert music. The string quartet has been one of the core ensembles of Western classical music for a good 3 centuries now. But generally speaking, never the twain have met. So to boldly go where no one has gone before, Wang Jie, what was the idea and how has it been putting together organ and string quartet in the piece that we'll hear in the second half?
So the only honest way I can say this is that I write a lot of symphonic and operatic work, so my sensibilities tend to gravitate towards the larger forces, the symphony orchestras and the opera theater. And so due to the power of projection, which all of us share, by the way, when I see a string quartet, when I hear a string quartet, I hear an orchestra in the string quartet. And then when I'm also an organist, so I'm biased to love the instrument, and I think I feel and understand the potential and the expressive potential and the capability of this orchestral instrument, which, it's literally an orchestra. This is an orchestra. There's Daryl, maybe you can tell us how many pipes. Usually it's up to thousands of pipes that are behind here.
Yeah, I think there's probably a little over 5,000 pipes up behind all of that. So.
And that's like this is a very significant concert instrument, so it's very different from the service instruments that we tend to hear from church services and the instrument that I practice on. So this, you will hear Daryl today and his orchestration. These are all organists' interpretation of the notes. I didn't really put in any indication for Daryl what are the instrument and moments of these recipes that Daryl actually discovered through learning this new work. So to put these 2 together, I think of it as sort of a concerto for string quartet and a concerto for organ, but at the same time. I feel like words are not able to catch up with the imagination that took over my inspiration at some point. It's like, oh, this space is so mysterious. Let me just find out what kind of outrageous thing that I could come up with. So this is my very best attempt at a combination that is so exciting and so new, and it's full of new possibilities.
It's a 20-minute piece, essentially in one long gesture. There are not movement breaks in the piece. And Daryl, as the organist, this presents some special challenges for you. I mean, Wang Jie talked about choosing the registrations. That means choosing the sounds for each section of the piece. That's one thing. But as we saw in the first half, you literally have your back facing out. So you can't see the musicians you're playing with in the quartet. How has this experience been for you?
Yeah, I mean, luckily here we're able to get fairly close, so I can catch a few glimpses out of the corner of my eye. But a lot of it, I think you described the other day, is sort of the feeling like when someone walks up behind you, there's sort of this synergy that is created by collaborative music making that's really exciting and really effective. And so we're able to do that in this piece and hold things together in a really unique way. Organ, of course, collaborates a lot with vocal music. We do a lot of choral and congregational and solo rep. But to work with fabulous string players and other instrumentalists is such a treat to really do that really high level of chamber music. So, I mean, this is a real treat to be able to get to do this because it's way outside of the norm.
There's still a lot of music to get to. The Debussy String Quartet right after the break, one of my favorite pieces ever written for 2 violins, viola, and cello. And then the world premiere of your new piece. And I want to get to that, all of that fairly quickly, but just before we break, Jie, a little bit about the title for one thing, and I also want to talk about the influences of Indian classical music, but the title, The Night When You See Again.
I think the title, if I tell you where the title and when the title come, it's a PR nightmare. Because the piece came to me first, and then I was almost done with the larger stuff in the piece, and then coming down to the details, and then I was scratching my head. It's still without a title. But I already start to like the piece, and I like the way that it just expanded, explores and explores. It's almost a sense of that migration that is in the body of all of us. This is the foundation of our species. We migrated from the African savanna, and our species, this sense of migration, this sense of movement, this sense of motion, it is in all of us, and this is the common ground, and our sense of time is intricately tied to the fabric of time that is our universe. And so this piece is sort of me wondering out loud what it's like to live from moment to moment in the fabric of time. And it so just happened that Louis Glick's poem collection arrived from Amazon, and then I just leafed through it, and my thumb chose this poem. And the poem, The Night When You See Again, it describes, of course, you know, the poetry is so beautiful, I'm not gonna ruin it for you, but the sensibility of it is that there's so much migration and immigration that happens that your eyes are unable to see because it happens silently and sometimes happens in the darkness. But when you hear someone, when you actually use your ears, and you can hear all of the migration, all of the history. You know, the best example I can give you is that I don't see my mom, really. My mom lives at the other end of the earth. She lives in Shanghai. And for some reason, I would track her mood throughout the day. And by the end of the day, she leaves me a voice message. It says it all. What her mood has been, what her day has been, but I don't see her. So it's almost like a catch-up game. Why is it that for me as a musician, as a composer, my eyes are always struggling to catch up with my ear, and I'm always listening for something that is more real to me than what my eyes are telling me. And this brings me to the core of something I've been exploring as an artist is what is the connection between people who don't share the same face, don't share the same faith, and do not share the same background. And that's the question that I've been wondering out loud through this piece.
We could dive into great detail about some of the technical aspects of the piece, but I'll just mention that, Jie, I know you're a serious student of Indian classical dance because you and I take lessons together in a dance form called Bharatanatyam, which is from the South Indian tradition. And you're a tremendous fan of Indian classical music. And Indian classical music literally has a different scale than what we're used to as Western music lovers. And there are some notes that are kind of in between the notes. So Daryl has an organ, which has 12 notes to an octave. But there are some string writing that Jie has done for this piece that calls for notes like between E and E flat. What's E half flat or quarter flat or 3/4 flat, 3/4 sharp, 1/4 sharp. So there are some notes in the strings that might seem to be out of tune to our Western ears, but in fact, they're just based on a different system. Matt, can you show us a little bit of?
So I'll first say that this is not what you're taught when you're young, and my mother, who's in the audience, did not teach me this for good reason, but it's so fascinating to explore all these microtones and quarter tones between half steps. Here's a B.
This is B, the note B.
Now what would you like me to play?
A quarter flat.
B.
And then a B flat.
And this is a B flat. And this is, she also write a double flat too? So this would be
3/4 flat. 3/4. So, but in the context of the good intonation that our Western ears has been tuned to, so every culture in the World Heritage of Music, we all discovered the overtone series, and we all understand there's this octave, and then there's these partials, and every culture has discovered this. This is a gift from nature, and so every culture has their own understanding of how to divide an octave. For us, it's 12 notes and more or less equal. Not really, there's no such thing as actually equal division of the octave into 12. But in some cultures, in the culture, for example, in Chinese, in some regions of China, 5 notes and they're having a party. They don't need any more. And they just kind of shuffle it through. Then in Indian classical, they depending on who you talk to, they have between 22 to 27, 28 notes in an octave. And once they get into these between notes, they also have all of the notes we have. But once they get into these notes that they call the colors, the raga, they call the scales ragas. It's basically a way to paint your mind. So once these notes are hit in a very tasteful way, it takes decades to even be tasteful in capturing these notes. It releases all the flavors in the sound. And I've been paying close attention to this heritage for more than 20 years now. And I can tell you that I still am at the beginning of experiencing every raga that's available. It's just not possible. There's not enough lifetimes for me to discover all the raga. So there's some influence in that. There's also living in New York City for the last 20-something years, having immigrated from Shanghai, which makes New York kind of feel mellow. And so I am at the intersection of so many different cultures, Afro-Cuban, like I have neighbors are Dominican Republican and Puerto Rican, and I lived in all kinds of different neighborhoods and traveled to, there's everything in New York City and what it means. And there's also the United Nations. So I feel like being a living composer today in 21st century, I feel like I'm the United Nations of musical culture. I get to be the United Nations of musical cultures. And I get to, when I work, I get to be at a position where all of these influences becomes part of me. And in the spirit of James Baldwin, I would like to say that the truth for me about diversity is actually from inside out. I think for me, the most important thing is that I can expand my perspectives to be able to embrace all of the different peoples that live in my city and live in this world and live in United States. And once I can expand my perspectives, that's where I can begin to create works that would resonate with the diversity of the audience. And that is the reality of living in the United States today, living in today's musical culture, different age, different immigrants, different communities, and different musical background. So it's a very exciting time to be a living composer today, and I'm very grateful that all of you come out tonight to support a world premiere. It really means the world to me.
So in just a moment, we'll hear Claude Debussy's string quartet, music by a French composer who happened to be very curious about Pacific cultures, and he had just seen a Balinese gamelan at the World Expo in Paris, and that helped influence the piece that we're just about to hear. And then right after that, the world premiere of The Night When You See Again by Wang Jie. My thanks, Daryl and Matt and Wang Jie, for joining me. And thanks to all of you for being here.